So welcome to our 2 p.m. session with Joe Pecor. You all are in for a big treat. This is going to be a really great hands-on experience for you to learn more about retargeting. We are super proud to have Joe with us. Joe is a staff member here in the College of Communication Information. His official title is here, Digital and Field Marketing Specialist for the School of Information Sciences. But Joe's background is a little bit more diverse, with tons of experience in digital advertising roles and agency work, and work for clients such as Microsoft, Toyota, Subway, and Smoothie King. He has a vast knowledge base with web and web development, and we are really glad that he's here today. So let's give all of our attention to Joe.
All right, hey, thank you for the introduction, Corey. So today we are going to talk about retargeting. How many people in the room are familiar with retargeting and how it works? Okay. Perfect, well you're in the right place. So retargeting is, from my experiences in the last decade, it's I was saying in the past that retargeting is quickly becoming a cornerstone of any marketing campaign, but we're already there. All the major players are using retargeting in various forms for their integrated advertising campaigns, whether that be paired with print and field advertising or digital advertising. So quickly, one second. All right. So in regards to social media, in terms of social audience targeting options, there's a lot of different ways that you can target people with social media advertisements. And when I say social media advertisements, there's an important distinction there between social media as a social platform where you message your friends and see pictures of people's babies and all that good stuff. But social media is actually a media channel. And it's important as we go through this presentation, we're not thinking of social media strictly as just like, how can we put messages in, organic messages in people's feeds. We're actually paying for strategic placements in people's news feeds and stories where it makes sense, so they have a cohesive native experience in the various social media platforms. So you can see we have various audience targeting options. We have connections, behavior, interests, demographic, and organic. But today we are talking about remarketing. So behavioral retargeting, aka remarketing, or just simply retargeting, all of those are interchangeable, and I'm gonna switch those out because for whatever reason I have the habit of calling it retargeting, remarketing, but it all means the same thing. Retargeting, behavioral retargeting, remarketing, is a form of online advertisements where consumers are targeted by previous internet actions. So this could be a visit to an e-commerce site. How many of you have been on Amazon, looked at a bunch of products, and then saw those same things that you looked at pop up on the side of a website? Yep, that's what we're talking about today. So it could be something like somebody's making a donation, and they visit a donation page and don't convert. You can actually segment out those non-converters on that donation page to serve them ads on various social media platforms where they make sense. So these are just a few examples, and we're going to be covering them as we go through the presentation. So why is retargeting important? 98% of US e-commerce traffic does not convert on the first visit. Pretty crazy. That's 98% of leads coming to a website that's not converting on that first visit. Website visitors who are retargeted with display ads are 70% more likely to convert on a website. Someone's already familiar with that brand, that kind of makes sense. If they're coming back to your website, they're probably going to convert, or they have a higher likelihood of converting. 69% of shopping carts are abandoned without ever completing a purchase. Retargeting can increase ad response up to 400%. So I've ran various forms of retargeting campaigns throughout the years, everything from standard run-of-the-mill branding. You visited a homepage, you get served with an ad, to dynamic inventory ads. And in regards to normal display ads, which are more broad, but they're targeting, like you're just targeting a geographic region, as opposed to someone that's visited your websites. I mean, retargeting response rates pretty much blow it out of the water compared to other display mediums, which is why they're a little more expensive. Retargeting ads are 76% more likely to be clicked on than regular display ads. So today we're going to cover several different aspects of retargeting. We're going to run through a real-life example of a retargeting scenario. We're going to run over the history and different social media providers with retargeting. Run over just a quick overview of all the ad types on Facebook. Facebook's kind of the leader in various ad types within their platform. So we're going to focus on their different offerings. Where does retargeting fit in an integrated digital media plan? Calculating budget. So I'm sorry, but we're going to do a little bit of math. And then run over case studies, best practices, and then we'll move on to a short exercise where you all will be creating ads for an animal shelter. Yeah. So how does retargeting work? So here's Harold. Harold is a successful ad PR alumni that has transitioned into a lucrative career as an account executive in the tech sector.
Go Harold.
Yeah, go Harold. He's at work thinking, man, I should really give to my college and make a donation to ad PR.
Please, Harold.
So Harold visits the ad PR donate page on his mobile phone when he has a free moment at work. He opens his wallet. Oh, dang, he says. He left his debit card at a restaurant the prior night, so he can't convert. You know, classic Harold. So Harold, when he visits the donation page, and AdPR doesn't actually do this, or UT doesn't do this to my knowledge. This is strictly an example. But on the donation page that Harold visits, AdPR has a Facebook Instagram tag, aka pixel. So those terms are interchangeable. Pixel, tag, cookie. You'll hear various agencies or organizations call them different things. Which is a small snippet of code that drops a cookie onto Harold's mobile device. So stored on Harold's device, he visits the site, he gets a little cookie in his browser. The cookie is a tiny file containing a string of numbers and letters that allow different advertising platforms to learn about their website, websites, visitors, and online behavior. So all data is sent and received using a privacy-safe method called data hashing, which that's what Facebook calls it. Different platforms may call it different things. But what happens is Harold's assigned a user ID that's linked with his Facebook profile, but that's not traceable to his actual Facebook profile through something called data hashing, which basically encrypts the data as it goes back and forth. But what it lets Facebook do is kind of take a look into Harold's online behavior, whether it be on that website or just his general interests. Like he could be into sports or rock climbing or cycling or various interests. So it can actually put him in a pool of cycling enthusiasts or swimmers or sports or whatever he's into. So later that week, Harold is relaxing on the couch after work, and he pulls up his Instagram and leisurely starts flipping through his Instagram newsfeed. Now, Facebook and Instagram are actually ran on the same platform because Facebook owns Instagram, so you can literally create Instagram ads and Facebook ads at the same time. So calling the ad. So after swiping through 3 of his friends' posts, Instagram has indicators in place that designate an ad should go in that 4 slot. So typically, like you can count them if you pull up your Instagram, every third or fourth story that you view is an advertisement for some company. So a lot of things happen in a fraction of a second before that slot is loaded with an advertisement. So Instagram alerts their ad auction, which reads the cookie installed on Harold's mobile device. Because Facebook and Instagram tagged Harold earlier with a cookie, he's eligible for a retargeting ad from UT and a number of other advertisers. So this is all happening in a fraction of a second. So in that fraction of a second, there can actually be millions of advertisers that are bidding at the same time for that slot. So there's a lot of different variables that go in there. So the ad that wins the auction is the one with the highest total value. And this is not only true for Facebook, it's true for Twitter, any of the Google ads that you see, YouTube, they all go through the same ad exchange process. So the different values that and variables that go into who wins the ad auction are the bid that the advertiser has on that ad space, estimated action rates. So Facebook and Instagram want a good user experience for the people on their platform. So they want to serve ads that people engage with because that improves like overall user experience. And what Facebook does is that they reward advertisers with higher engagement rates with lower bids, so that if you have a higher interaction rate, you can actually put in a lower bid for your ad, which improves your overall costs. And then ad quality and relevance to a landing page. So, obviously you don't want to advertise, say, like, a veterinarian and then link to like a dairy farm. Like, you want to make sure that your content on your website is actually relevant to the ad. And a good way of doing that is including some of the same language and keywords, having images that are applicable, to the landing page, and just making sure it's a cohesive experience. Like, what message do you have in that ad, and how is that message complemented when they actually visit that landing page? So, what is ad PR doing at this moment? So, at this time, ad PR receives an automated bid request from the Facebook advertising platform. So no one actually in ad PR has to do anything. It's all automated on Facebook's end. It's just set up beforehand. But in this case, it's the Facebook Ads Manager, which receives the automated bid request, which also runs the Instagram ads. So AdPR previously created an Instagram remarketing audience, so that pixel that they stored on the website. They created an audience for users that have been to the donation page, but they haven't visited the thank you page. So a lot of remarketing is just if-then statements, like target this person if they've been to this page, but has not visited the thank you page. It's pretty simple to set up, when people pitch it as something a little more complicated, but it can get complicated, but it's actually pretty simple to set all that up in the back end. So AdPR's Facebook Business Manager account sees that Harold's anonymized profile meets the requirements to be served an ad, and he is loaded up an Instagram ad. So that was a lot of content to cover in a fraction of a second, but that's kind of everything that's going on behind the scenes when an ad's loaded up. So AdPR wins the ad auction, and Harold sees the ad. Having recovered his credit card and have it the night before, and having the time to do so, he sets up reoccurring donations to the AdPR Enrichment Fund with a note that his donation should go towards student scholarships. So that's Harold, and he feels all warm and fuzzy about his donation, and he's had a great user experience. And that's how retargeting works in a nutshell. So, recap. Harold's in your target audience, visits your website, but he leaves without converting. Later, he visits his social media newsfeed and stories. He's then served an ad that recaptures interest, targets conversion, serves as a branding touch point, and then he has a great user experience, and he's targeted with relevant ads. All right, so do we have any questions about that before I go into the history of publishers and ad types?
I have a question. So what if I wanted to do this, right,
Mhm.
as the director of ad PR? How does somebody go about getting their message in front of somebody who's being, how do I get into that ad auction?
Well, we can take this, offline later on, but the gist is create a Facebook advertising account, Facebook Business Manager account, or Twitter account, or any of these different business manager accounts on different social media platforms. You install the pixel on your website. Then you can, which for us poses a little bit of a challenge because the actual donation website is outside of the domain of our website. But if you want to create a donation page on the Ad PR website, you can install the pixel. You can look at your audience size, which we'll cover on how to how to set budgets and things along those lines. But you take a look at your audience size. You set your budget according to your audience size and how often you want the ads shown, and then you create messaging in the Facebook Business Manager targeted at that audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Question, Joe. So that's what those little square boxes on websites mean? That they?
Those run almost exactly on the same methodology.
I never knew that's what that little box means. The little
Yeah.
F box and the Instagram box, and it means it leaves a cookie if you come here.
So no, that the pixel or cookie that's installed on a site is literally a 1x1 area, 1 pixel by 1 pixel. So you can't actually see it with the naked eye.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of in the back end of the coding.
okay.
So
it's not those little icons that you see on people's websites.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're invisible to the eye. But that's a great question because I didn't cover that. All right, so we're gonna go over a brief history of retargeting. Now, Google's on here. They are, Google Plus just ended. So they aren't a big player in the social media landscape, but they were the forerunner of modern retargeting as we know it. So I wanted to make sure that they're featured in this timeline so we have a better understanding of how different social media players kind of followed suit. So in 2010, Google launched retargeting. They had trials in 2009 where they collaborated with the International Advertising Bureau, which is about 650 leading media companies that essentially shape and develop technical standards for the digital landscape. So in 2009, they launched trials, and they were largely successful with the brands that were involved in them. And in 2010, they launched them on a larger scale. In 2012, Google simplifies things with the ad tag manager. So from a technical standpoint, it just makes it real easy to plug in cookies and do it on multiple pages and track conversions on your website. You can see if, what landing pages are converting and things along those lines. In 2012, Facebook launched retargeting. Facebook was one of the leaders in retargeting and their advertising platform. They were one of the first social media platforms to actually launch advertising. They saw the successes that Google was having with retargeting back in 2010, and a couple years later they followed suit. In the same year, YouTube launched retargeting, so Google owns YouTube. You were actually able to retarget on Google Ads to people that have visited YouTube profiles before this, but actually being able to serve video ads to people that have visited your website was launched in 2012. In 2013, Google launches dynamic capabilities. So in my last position, I was working in the automotive industry, so I handled about $500,000 a month in ad spend to Facebook, Instagram, Google AdWords, the banner display, different audience targeting exchanges. And in terms of working with dynamic ads and serving up products that people have already engaged with, just the response rates and ROI on that were just they're through the roof, and We'll cover a little of that on the case studies later on in the presentation. But in 2013, Twitter launches retargeting. Instagram launched retargeting in 2015. So Facebook owns Instagram. So around this time, they integrated Instagram into their advertising platform and just made them kind of synchronize with each other. So in the workshop portion of today, we're actually going to launch or create Facebook and Instagram ads, and you'll be able to see what they look like on Instagram stories and all that. In 2015, Facebook launches dynamic capabilities. So it's kind of interesting to look at this and see that in 2010, Google launched retargeting. 2012, Facebook launches retargeting, just 2 years later. So again, we see 2 years later, Facebook follows suit with dynamic capabilities with their advertising. 2016, Pinterest launches retargeting. 2017, LinkedIn launches retargeting, and then we have Snapchat in 2017 that also launched retargeting.
And what is dynamic capabilities? How is that different from retargeting?
So dynamic capabilities are the ability to actually port in inventory on, say, like an e-commerce website. So say you're like Amazon and you have a user that came in and looked at a bunch of Nike shoes. So what that cookie is actually able to do is record that you are on that page engaged with that product, transmit that information back to the ad exchange, and then that ad exchange is connected with the IMS or inventory management system of that platform. So it's able to actually pull in the images like from the website, pull in like the pricing from the website, and actually insert those same products back into an advertisement that pops into your newsfeed.
Okay.
So that all happens in a fraction of a second. It's crazy to think about,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And sorry, one more question about the timeline? Sorry.
Sure.
So all of these platforms, they have been selling ads before this.
Many of them.
And it was using those other spokes on that first chart of yours.
Mhm.
They were already selling ads using demographics and behavior.
Yeah, that's
data,
good.
and then it looks like maybe about a decade later, they come up with, they advanced to retargeting. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's essentially smarter advertising. So, digital advertising is able to get more granular than traditional. So you're able to get just kind of like a little bit smarter with the way that you're targeting people. So the difference between this is we can basically pay a little more to serve an ad to someone that has engaged with our site, or even with the other targeting methods, they've shown interest in the category that your product is in. So you're able to target that individual person as opposed to something like radio. Radio is more of a branding tool. So you're just spreading a message over a geographic area, just hoping that you hit that person. So you're maximizing the amount of people that you're hitting with that message, hoping to kind of like land on the right person. So with digital, it's a little more targeted, and as time goes on, it just gets smarter and smarter, and that's kind of what's shown with like the dynamic capabilities, which has particularly been effective in the automotive industry, which is where I actually came from a couple years ago.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so some different ad types. So we're gonna look at some Facebook ad types. So they're pretty consistent between different platforms, but Facebook has the most diverse set. So you have your standard image ads. So these are good for offers or showing a new product or something along those lines. If you have like a single message that you want to supplement with an ad, that is the way to go. Carousel ads. So those are most widely used with dynamic ads, so the ones that actually port into inventory. So if someone's looked at multiple products, you can actually flick through all the products that you looked at. And they even have them set up nowadays where they port in additional products that you may be interested in. So you look, say, at like 3 different pairs of Nike shoes, so they can find that same similar products that meet like that price range and are under the same brand, and actually port some new inventory in to increase like the likelihood that you'll come back to the site and actually see some fresh content. You have slideshows, so that's if you're trying to tell a story with your advertisements. That's kind of like a slideshow. It's kind of like this PowerPoint presentation. Like we're, we're going through a story. So if you're trying to tell a story, engage with a potential donor or something along those lines, slideshow may be a good way to go. There's ads that can actually port into Facebook Messenger. There are collection ads, so that's kind of like a web page in an ad. So you're actually able to build out what's almost similar to like a web page with like a header image, and you can port in different products and things along those lines. Playables, which are actually interactive apps, mostly for like app developers and things along those lines if they're trying to promote those ads. I know I get those Candy Crush ones in my Facebook newsfeed, or maybe it's an interstitial that pops up at some point. Then video ads and ads within stories, those kind of fall in the same line, but there's multiple sources that say 2019 is the year of video marketing. And it really is an effective medium, especially for branding, if you're trying to make like a lasting impression on your audience. Because there's definitely more emotional appeal in something that involves sight and sound as opposed to just like a static image in someone's newsfeed. So, where does remarketing fit in a digital media strategy? So, I wanted to frame where social remarketing fits and focus on touch points. Because you shouldn't invest all your money, or any advertiser shouldn't invest all their money into remarketing, which I've literally had conversations with clients that want to pull their budgets from everything else and just invest in remarketing because the metrics are better. And it's just like, yeah, it makes sense because these people have already been to your website, they've already engaged with your product. You're not trying to make people aware of what you offer. You're just reinforcing your message to leads that already exist. So digitization is steadily becoming the main pathway for consumer journeys. So in a 2013 study by McKinsey, by an organization called McKinsey, they attributed digital touch points to 2.5 times greater conversions than companies that had touch points digital touch points at lower levels. So by maximizing the amount of digital touch points in someone's journey, whether it's become a student or say they're buying a car or something along those lines, by maximizing those touch points, it was attributed to 2.5 times greater conversions. So a study that Google did to illustrate this was a 2016 car buying journey survey that Google did. So they followed one car buyer, who they call Stacy, over the course of 3 months before she purchased a vehicle. So during that 3-month period, she had 900 total touch points, total digital touch points. So those digital touch points are defined as searches, website visits, video views, clicks onto the say like Toyota website, clicks onto like various like Toyota dealership websites, like research articles, blogs, things along those lines. So that's a lot of touch points. So when I was working with automotive dealerships, you kind of want to frame it like what portion of that 900 pie do you want? So where does retargeting fit with all these digital touch points? So there are 3 main phases of the consumer journey. And when I was working in the automotive sector, I worked with so many account groups. So these are big clusters of automotive dealerships that had like some very smart, talented, like savvy people. And then I worked with some demographics where they were a little bit older and they were more used to like radio and TV and traditional advertising. So I would frame it as you have three phases. This is the exact example that I would show to them, and I tweaked it over the course of the years. But you have your three phases, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this. There's other versions of this that have more steps, but we're going to keep it pretty simple today. So you have your awareness phase, your consideration phase, and your purchase phase. So you're trying to make people aware of what you offer. Once they're aware, they're considering you and other brands or other products, and then they actually purchase and convert. So they become a student, they buy the car, they buy the pair of Nike shoes. So I had several dealers start calling me Farmer Joe because I use this example. So that's me with the farmer hat. So I phrase it as sowing the seeds for a successful digital media plan. So we're going to cover more than one medium with retargeting, but it's important to kind of frame it with other digital advertising mediums, because they all reinforce each other. You should never have all your eggs in one basket. You should have a diverse media portfolio. So first, you plant seeds. So this is the awareness phase. You can target paid search, outreach with display, video, audio, which they do have digital audio ads through exchanges similar to what we saw like with Facebook, and social media. So in terms of dealing with clients, this was the most difficult to justify because it's branding. I mean, it's essentially branding and awareness, and the ROI on that is a lot more difficult to track, and that's just because you're hitting the top of the funnel. You're going to get less conversions with this beginning of the consumer journey, because it takes 3 months to a year before someone decides on what car they want to buy next. So this is targeting a year out, 3 months out, 2 months out. There aren't going to be a lot of conversions or engagement from it. So you're basically, like, your KPI is that impression. So when you're bringing this to your client, it's important to kind of frame it in that way. Like, this is, it's important. It's the top of the funnel. The KPIs aren't going to be as strong as other things, but it's still important. You irrigate. So this is during the consideration phase. I always laugh when I come to this step because I had one of the clients that I worked with. I would bring this phase to him and I'd be like, oh yeah, it's like, retargeting is kind of like the fertilizer for advertising campaigns. And he's like, he thinks about it for a second and he's like, could you not refer to our digital advertising as feces? And I'm like, that is a good point. So it's phrased as irrigate now. So retargeting is really effective for longer consumer journeys. So if they visit your website and say you're an automotive dealership, someone's gonna go through all the similar dealerships in the area, and they're going to look at the different inventory at different dealerships. So if you're an auto dealer, you want to keep your inventory in front of them, you want to keep your ads in front of them, you want to maintain those touch points and familiarity. So retargeting is a great way to do that. And then harvest. So that is the different mediums in place to capture conversions. Paid search is one of the most effective ways to do that, as well as different retargeting mediums. So if you're an e-commerce store and someone visits your site, they put a bunch of stuff in their cart, they abandon their cart. Retargeting is a good way of bringing them back to actually check out. Same with donations. Retargeting is one of the best harvesters because someone may come to your donation page or visit an alumni page on your website, or something where they are showing either intent donating or that they're in your target audience for someone who would donate. So retargeting is a real good way of bringing people back to the site and essentially converting.
Joe?
Yes.
In that kind of retargeting, with the dynamic kind, do they know what was in your cart that you abandoned, or they can retarget specifically to that?
Yep.
How does that, is that in that cookie as well, or
It is.
something else?
Yep. So that cookie tracks all of the online behavior and anonymizes it, yeah. All right, so I hate to do this to you guys, but we're gonna do a little bit of math. This actually came from trial and error with myself for the last, 5 years. In the past, I've worked for agencies that have trouble with either setting retargeting budgets too high and then they don't spend, or they're too low and your frequency is, or the amount of ads that you're delivering are really, really small. You may deliver one ad to one person. But in terms of the formula for determining your price ceiling, so digital advertising formulas are based on CPM, or cost per 1,000 impression, which means the cost to run 1,000 ads. So CPM, cost per 1,000 impression, is kind of like the gold standard with how most advertising is, or at least display advertising is kind of bought and sold. So typically, depending on the platform, depending on the publisher and your ad quality score, the cost per 1,000 impression with retargeting is $8 to $12 per 1,000 ads served. So does that make sense? You guys still with me? All right, step one. You take 70% of website visitors to the page that you're retargeting. So if you have 10,000 people that are going to your, say like your checkout page or something along those lines, or your donation page, you want to cut that by 30% and assume that 70% are eligible to receive retargeting ads. So this is mostly from trial and error with myself throughout the years. I found that if I do 80-90%, that I have spending issues because the audience list is just too big. But 70% is kind of like the sweet spot to determining like what's the maximum amount of money that we can spend without running into issues for our client. Take your daily frequency cap and multiply it by 30.4. 30.4 is the average days in a month. So when I say frequency cap, I mean the amount of ads that one individual user can be served. So when you set up your advertising campaigns, you can actually set how often you want each individual cookie, so that anonymized profile, how many ads per day that person can be served. So you multiply, and then you multiply those two together, and then you get the total amount of ads that can be delivered in a month. So advertising runs on cost per 1,000 impression, so that means we need to divide it by 1,000 because the standard is you buy and sell 1,000 impressions as one unit, essentially. So you divide that by 1,000, and then you multiply it by the cost per 1,000 impression, and that is your total maximum budget. So this is kind of like the secret sauce. Like this is I have calculators built out where you just plug in a number and it'll auto put out what the maximum total budget is for any given retargeting campaign. And if you're looking for the Excel formula, a recording of this will be up later. That's the Excel formula. So if you plug that into Excel and replace these numbers with what you determined are those variables, and you can actually, as digital campaigns go on, you can see what your individual cost per 1,000 impression is for your retargeting campaign, so you can get a little more specific as more data rolls in. All right, and we're running pretty low on time, so I'm going to run through the case studies real quick. So today we're going to look at some real-life examples of Facebook dynamic retargeting. So back in 2017, the automotive agency that I worked with started launching dynamic capabilities for automotive dealership, which took a lot of technical effort because it was done at scale where there's there's thousands of dealership websites that were involved in this one agency. So they basically linked up Facebook Business Manager with our thousands of websites to be able to like port into inventory and kind of do what basically Amazon does in porting in like the same thing that somebody looked at. So today we're going to look at some real life examples of when that was rolled out and the impact it had at a regional level, as well as a case study on an individual basis where we had 2 dealers, one who launched it, after a couple months they removed it, and then one dealership that remained consistent through that same time period, and the impact on their overall leads compared to national trends in sales. I was working with a region of about 50 dealerships who were early adopters of this Facebook dynamic advertising, so they got on board a lot more quickly than other OEMs. OEM is like a parent company like Toyota or Honda or Mitsubishi. So they jumped on a lot more quickly, and they include just a small portion of Facebook dynamic ads into their media spend. So at the highest level, you can see that they had 8% of total spend for about these 50 dealerships in Facebook Dynamic, 12% in standard banner remarketing. So you brought up the banners that are on the sides of websites. So they had about 12% of their overall budget of the region going there, and 4% going towards basic display that's targeting people that showed interest in the auto industry. And then 76% going to paid search. So I don't know if that surprises you, but paid search is the most expensive by far. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when anyone researches anything, the first place they go is to Google. There's a lot of high quality leads there. It's a great way to build that first connection. So you may pay a lot more to drive someone with paid search like to your website, but it's pretty cheap to actually remarket. And if you send them to your website, you have your remarketing pixel set in place. You don't have to keep paying for Google to send people over to your website. You can keep bringing them back with those retargeting ads that you can change the messaging to. So when we look at regional comparison of this group set compared to other OEMs, so OEMs would be other automotive manufacturers. During Q1 of 2017, when they adopted these ads, and a majority of these other OEMs did not. When we look at cost per attributed advertising visit, cost per attributed advertising inventory view, so that's a KPI that you're going to see in e-commerce and with dealerships in the automotive industry. Is if someone's looking at a model on a website, like they went to their local dealership website, they clicked from there to the new inventory, they scrolled through the new inventory, they visited a specific model, that's a pretty clear sign of intent that they're seriously looking at vehicles. That's a strong KPI for automotive or even for e-commerce. And then engagement rate, click-through rate, interaction rate, that rightmost column, that's several different variations of what you call that. For these purposes, we're going to call it engagement rate. So with this one group of dealerships, we saw a cost per attributed advertising visit at about $1.50. So that's almost 2 times as cheap as the one at the end of that graph. And when we launched these Facebook campaigns, we didn't add budget, we just rearranged it over to Facebook. So there actually wasn't any change in overall ad spend. Our cost per attributed inventory view was, you can see how it compares against the other competitors. And the average engagement rate was the highest of the bunch. So this is one OEM compared to other ones like there may be Subaru or Toyota or I'm not allowed to share, but the Facebook dynamic proved to be just as effective, if not more effective, than banner remarketing. And a lot of that has, and I think a lot of that has to do with just like the nature of social media. If you're scrolling through your Facebook, newsfeed, you have the time to kill. You have time to go on and you see the donation page for ad PR and you forgot about it. Like, typically you have a few minutes to spare to actually interact with that, and you're kind of in like an information seeking. Like you don't mind being surprised by information, whether it be an update from your friends, like an update that someone got engaged, or an update with a product that you're really interested in.
Hey, Joe, one more question. So, do these cookies wear out? I mean, after you remarket, if you send 4 or 5 per day, do you stop?
Yeah, you can set different parameters on it to tag someone for X amount of time.
Okay.
So that changes from industry to industry. So for example, like for recruiting, like for a school, the application process for recruiting for grad school is really long. So you want to have a longer cycle that person can stay tagged in, as opposed to maybe something a little shorter, like with product placement, say like a new pair of shoes or something like that. Like people aren't in market for the same pair of shoes for like 90 days. Like typically, if they need a pair of shoes, they're gonna buy it within 30 days or 15 days or whatever the research for that individual company states that they are in market. So you can use that research from each individual company to plan how long that they're going to be tagged in that remarketing cycle before they're determined no longer relevant. And also, all these different platforms are set up to where if they're served up an ad about 4 times and they don't interact, engage with it, even hover over it for an extended period of time, they'll actually scale back showing that ad to an individual and focus on a different set of people.
Okay.
All right, so this is what I like to call when a client's in the driver's seat, or when a dealer is in the driver's seat. So we had one client that was operating on a budget in Q1 2017 to where they launched Facebook Dynamic. It was performing really well. You can see here. This is some of the analytics that we would pull monthly. So they were spending about $2,500 in paid search, about $330 on Facebook Dynamic, about $320 on just standard banner remarketing. Their metrics were good all of Q1 and for a lot of Q2, but the dealer had more of a traditional mindset, as in he wanted to shift over to radio. And he wanted to also rely more on the higher level branding that was done by the manufacturer. So in the automotive industry, you have different tiers of advertising. You have like dealership individual advertising, and then you have all the way at the top where say Toyota or Subaru are spending like millions and buckets of money on all these branding efforts. So they just wanted to kind of just let the manufacturer brand for them. So they decided to decrease their digital advertising expenditure, and they reduced their budget in paid search by 85%. Facebook Dynamic, they even agreed, it's doing okay. So they decided to keep 15% of that budget, and they just completely eliminated the banner remarketing. So you got to take into consideration that the automotive cycle is longer. Like people aren't just gonna you're not gonna launch one paid search ad and then just sell a car from that one paid search ad. So in relation to the actual metrics that followed, so in May 2017, this is when their advertising portfolio was active. It was consistent. So at a time when national sales were down by about 0.5%, the leads coming to their dealership and phone calls and form submissions were actually up by 142%. Those were similar metrics in the months before, but like I said, the dealer just he had a feeling that traditional was more effective and wanted to invest there. So June 2017, after those reductions, when year-over-year national sales were up for that brand by 2.1%. Their leads actually dropped by 30% year over year. And then in July of 2017, their leads were down by 2%. So you can almost see the direct impact because that's the only thing they did differently in that time span. So we had another client in that same region. They had a similar budget, similar demographics in their area. So we did kind of like some A/B testing on what was the impact of just keeping that same budget consistent and keeping that portfolio of Facebook dynamic retargeting, standard banner retargeting, and paid search. So you can see they had similar KPIs in terms of form submissions coming in, phone calls, attributed visits, and attributed engagements with their inventory. So during this time, May 2017, when year-over-year sales were up by 0.5%, dealership leads were up by 26%. In June of 2017, national sales for that OEM were up 2.1%, and dealership leads were up by 14%. And then in July, national sales were up by 7.8%, and year-over-year dealership leads were up by 3%. So that story does have a happy ending that the first client actually jumped back on board with his digital advertising portfolio months later, so everyone was happy. All right, so real quick, we're going to run over some best practices. I know we're a little bit over. So one of the most effective things you can do as an advertiser is just be empathetic towards your audience. Put yourself in their shoes. Think about how often they're seeing the ad, or basically just whether the message resonates on a human level. So when you're going through your media plans and you're figuring out which mediums fall in different portions of the consumer journey, just kind of put yourself in the shoes like, how would you feel if this was the first message you received? How would you feel if you were exposed to that message and had this supplemental message, this one, and finally like those last messages before the actual conversion takes place? Create wireframes for your creative messaging, so that's just what I was talking about. Don't be afraid to just write out flow charts on a whiteboard. I do it all the time. It's a really effective way of just visualizing how your message will not only resonate, but how from synchronizing the messages, like how it looks like kind of throughout that journey. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify platforms to maximize reach. So do some digging into the demographic information with each individual profile. Someone that's on Facebook may be a lot different than someone that's on LinkedIn, which has about 50% of all undergrad college graduates on there. So yeah, do a little research on the platforms that make sense and diversify your strategy. Avoid burnout with frequency capping and freshening creative. Generally, it's common that you update creative at least every 3 months, depending on which campaign that you're running. Some people do it on a bi-weekly basis, some people do it on a monthly basis. But it's important to avoid that burnout with frequency capping, which is how often someone could see ads. So that kind of circles back to empathy. Like, at what point do you see an ad for a place where you're just like, I'm tired of seeing that ad? I actually have marketing companies that retarget me because I work in recruiting for the School of Information Sciences, and they're pitching me on retargeting or Google AdWords, and I know they haven't set a frequency cap, because I literally would get the same ad 30 or 40 times in like 2 weeks, and before I like click the little button that I'm not interested in this ad. Consider exclusions, like converted users. So this is important for donations, or like e-commerce, or just any audience that you don't want seeing your ad. So with digital, you can be really smart with the people that you're targeting. So it's important to exclude people that have actually like donated, because like it can create a bad user experience if someone visits a donation page and then they're getting an ad the next day like, hey, donate again. Like, I just did that. And get granular. So on top of retargeting, all those other advertising methods that were shown in the first slide, you can actually layer those on top of retargeting. So you can get even smarter with your retargeting audience and just and make sure that you're serving the right message to the right person and just kind of like making the best use of either your advertising dollars or your client's advertising dollars. All right, so that's all I got before we move on to the workshop. Do you guys have any questions for me? Was that helpful? Do you guys feel like you're retargeting experts now? Like, yeah, you can go pitch it to a client and sell an awesome integrated marketing campaign with retargeting. Cool. All right, so we are going to move on to the workshop. All right, so I have a little handout. Yeah, you can cut it. All right, so I have